Welcome back. President Trump did drain the swamp today. Of course, he probably didn't think it would be one of his own cabinet secretaries. Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price is out, not because he failed repeatedly getting Obamacare repealed and replaced, which he did, but because he spent over $1 million of your tax money on private planes and military planes for personal/government business. Another not-so-great week for the president. Healthcare went down again, and he has spent more time tweeting about the NFL than he did about the growingly desperate situation in Puerto Rico. All in all, a week that was supposed to be about tax reform. And joining us for more is Christine Hughes of the Sarasota County Republican Party, Cheryl Wilson, the chair of the Manatee County Democratic Party, and Wendy March, political correspondent for the Tampa Bay Times. Welcome to all. Christine, welcome back. And I want to get your take on Tom Price, because the rallying cry during the Trump campaign, during the presidential election, was drain the swamp. This could not be what many Republicans were hoping for.
Well, I think we should put this a little bit in context. Yes, Price said all of these trips were approved. So, you know, he's going on good faith that he could do this. But I think what happens is we always forget about history. Chuck Schumer, a couple of years ago, he was rated the highest of using private charter flights in cost of all the senators, the 100 senators. And being from California, I have to use the example of Nancy Pelosi. When she was Speaker of the House from 2008 to 2009, she insisted on a military aircraft to take her back and forth to San Francisco. She spent $2.1 million.
Let me stop you there, because as a Speaker of the House, and you know, the current Speaker of the House and members of the leadership of both the Republican and Democratic parties do get that. The Speaker of the House is in line of succession to the presidency, so they are required to have not only a security detail, but to fly military transports.
Well, she specified military transport because she not only had herself transported to San Francisco, but she had an entourage with her every week, several extended members of the family.
But in Tom Price's case, he spent $25,000 to fly from Washington to Philadelphia. I mean, how can that be justified? Isn't that what exactly many voters, Republican and Democrat and Independent, just couldn't stand?
Well, but you have to give Trump credit. He took him out. So Trump didn't agree with it. He didn't think it was proper, and so he's gone.
And you know, Alan,
I give him a lot of credit for that.
I would disagree a bit with your lead-in that he was relieved not because of the failure of health care. I don't think that's completely unrelated to it. There are 3 other cabinet secretaries that are being looked at for the very same transgression, that have used a lot of private travel, and we haven't yet heard that they're on the chopping block.
Well, one of them, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, tried to get a military aircraft to go on this honeymoon. The other cabinet secretary, Zinke, the Interior Secretary, flying on the private aircraft of oil companies, you know, companies that he oversees. I mean, is that appropriate?
Well, we can also counter that. Betsy DeVos she pays for everything herself.
Right.
She has her own plane. Nobody ever even talks about that, though.
Right. Well, I mean, she could afford it. She could do it.
Look, I think Trump, he acted. He didn't agree with it. He said right away he didn't agree with it, and Price is gone.
Wendy, is this something that people care about?
Oh, absolutely. It's something that people care about. The situation regarding Nancy Pelosi was a big story at the time. I have to correct one thing. She didn't demand a military plane. Her security detail demanded an airplane that could make it from Washington to California nonstop, because stopping to refuel created a security issue. I wrote extensively about that because of the involvement of Adam Putnam.
But she couldn't take a private? I mean, she couldn't fly first class?
Not as a person in the line of presidential succession.
Then how did John Boehner, why did he fly commercial back home to Ohio when he was Speaker of the House? Because he did.
I don't know.
Well,
I didn't know anything about that.
Joe Biden rode the train, too.
One thing I would like to point out, though, about this is what I think the basic problem here is there is one advantage of having experience in government, and that is you begin to learn the ethical ropes over a period of time, and it sort of becomes ingrained in you. A lot of the Trump administration officials are wealthy former CEOs who are accustomed to dispatching themselves hither and yon on private planes without even thinking about it, and they're not accustomed to worrying about whose money they're spending because they're spending their private corporation money.
Tom Price was a member of Congress.
Yeah, he was a member of Congress.
Who was all about deficit reduction.
Well,
and
he's probably not the best example of this, but Mnuchin, for example, is, and I see this frequently, people who don't have experience in government just don't have the ethical field that becomes ingrained in you when you have reporters beating up on you for spending taxpayer money unwisely.
Like you.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think that's what we're seeing.
We are just getting warmed up. We'll have much more on the week in Washington right after we check the First Alert weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. The high-flying Secretary of HHS has been grounded. So has the latest effort to repeal and replace Obamacare. And joining us for more is Christine Hughes of the Sarasota County Republican Party, Cheryl Wilson, the chair of the Manatee County Democratic Party, and Wendy March, the political correspondent for the Tampa Bay Times. Christine, let me start with you. So in a week where, once again, health care went down without a vote, and in this incredible human tragedy in Puerto Rico where people are suffering, the president spent much more time taking on the NFL and its players. Given what was happening elsewhere, was that the right message this week?
Well, it seems that Trump was on a Twitter
Rant.
Yes.
Roll.
Let's put roll. But it was completely different from what Kaepernick had originally taken the knee for, which was police brutality. And Trump started in about respecting the flag. And that was his whole, I mean, it's like he was disconnected from the original protest and then saw that it was increasing. And you know, he has such respect, I think, for the military. And this just, he was obsessed with this. Now, in the meantime, it's a disappointment about health care. There's no question about it. But I think that the Republicans have just made a strategic mistake by trying to fix or jerry-rig something that they don't fundamentally agree with, instead of kind of starting over again, and they should have already had something in place. I'm not going to defend that. They've been out of office for 8 years complaining about it. They should have had a framework. I do believe, though, there seems to be a lot of movement in the aid to Puerto Rico. It appears that the biggest issue is that the electrical plant is functioning, but there's been such devastation around the island that they have no electricity.
Right. Wendy, it seems I was watching General Henry, who was basically President Bush's man in terms of fixing what went wrong with Katrina, and he said the mistake that was made was you should have known that this was an island, that it had to be handled differently than Florida and Houston, and that you needed airdrops of food and fuel so people can get that in order to power their vehicles, to get to the ports, to get the supplies. And why that did not happen, that was not pre-planned, is something that he doesn't understand.
Well, Trump has taken criticism not just from him, but also from the general who was in charge of the earthquake relief effort in Haiti. And the relief effort in Puerto Rico is drawing unfavorable comparisons to the effort that was made in Haiti. I think what you talked about earlier, the NFL coming up at this time, to me, it's yet another example, and I've talked about this on this show before, of Trump stepping on his own message. You know, at a time when he has the ability and a chance and often the skill and the content to look presidential. Instead, he goes off on a tangent and steps on his own message, and I think that's what he's done this week.
And Cheryl and Christine, I'm going to let you fight over this one. A new poll came out this week by Quinnipiac, which showed that American voters believe President Trump is not fit to serve as president by a percentage of 56 to 42%. Said the poller, Americans believe he's a divider responsible for a deepening chasm of racial discord. This is an inescapable characterization of President Trump from voters who see race relations deteriorating on his watch.
I believe Christine touched on something when she talked about how Trump moved away from what Kaepernick was initially taking his knee for, and he made it about something else that when he was completely tone deaf and blind to the racial injustice that the players were trying to call attention to. And I think that's the theme we're seeing in a Trump presidency. He is not informed, he's not in touch, he's, as we're talking about with the Puerto Rico response, he is not experienced in these areas. He is not putting people in place, has not put people in place to deal with those. You know, there are a lot of facets of emergency preparation, and surviving the storm is only one of them. There's mitigating what the damage is going to be. There's preparing for what's coming your way, and they knew that a major storm was heading that way. And then there's the recovery, which should be as much of the preparation and the mitigation as sitting there riding out the storm.
Christine, given all that, Lindsey Graham, the senator, said this makes tax reform and tax cuts even more important. He said today, it's the difference between succeeding as a party and failing. It's the difference between having a majority in 2018 or losing it. It's the difference between one term for president or two.
Well, let me go back to the question that you posed. I find it hard to believe that you can put the blame of the issue of race relations in this country and this, I wouldn't call it deterioration, but the situation it's in at the doorstep of President Trump. I mean, we had President Obama for 8 years, and Trump has been in office.
Yeah, but you know what, and we had Henry Lawrence, the former NFL player, on earlier this week, who made this comparison. When you talk about Charlottesville, he talked about fine people on both sides, Nazis and Klansmen, but then you're calling NFL players son of a bitches. And
yeah,
and
well, yes, but the whole Charlottesville thing, I think he has gone out of his way to clarify and to be very definitive about saying he does not support KKK, anti-Semite, etc.
At the moment, but then he will come back and talk about the fine people on both sides.
He finished that. I think what I was the point I'm making is, because of this issue with the flag and the respect for the country, that's when he said, if they do something like that, you should fire that SOB.
And that's a Republican businessman who is representing a party who has advocated for years that government be hands-off private business. But yet, as you said, we have the President of the United States telling business owners what to do with their own employees.
Wendy, this does go to the issue involving keeping his base. I tell you what, on Sunday, there are going to be protests at Raymond James Stadium, and people going there for the purpose of burning their Buccaneers jerseys.
Well, once again, I think it's just another example of the fact that President Trump simply cannot restrain himself from stoking his base. That's what he naturally gravitates toward doing. He wants to be up in front of a huge cheering rally that he had dozens of during his campaign, with people screaming and clapping his every word, and he'll do almost anything to generate that kind of atmosphere. But when he does this more and more, he is stepping on his own message as president, on his own legislative and policy initiatives by doing this.
Okay, we have to take a quick break, but we'll be back with final thoughts when we return. Our guest joins us right now for final thoughts. Given the context of everything that happened this week, there was a special election for state senate in the Miami area, and Wendy, Democrats in Florida are hoping that portends well to other special elections around the state, including one that will be coming up in a couple of months here.
Right. Well, they're hoping it portends well for 2018 as well as specials. What happened was a Democrat won a special election in a district that was previously held by a Republican, and this is considered a swing district. Hillary Clinton won it, but it had previously a Republican senator. Whether this means that Democrats are surging into 2018 is anybody's guess. I've been looking for results of that and haven't found anything concrete. But you do have two Democrats, two pretty serious Democrats, running in the special down here, and they've probably been encouraged by the Democrats' hope that an anti-Trump backlash will energize them, basically, it's just a time will tell thing.
Let's remind people this will be a special election coming up in February to replace Alex Miller, who, as we reported this week, resigned suddenly this week. You know, Cheryl, that district is not in Manatee County.
We'll be working it, though.
Okay.
We will be working.
I mean, you're going up against James Buchanan, the son of the congressman. That's a big name around here, and you know, are you hoping the results in Miami portend well for the results in this race?
I think what I would emphasize is that Annette Tadeo's race took on the personality of a statewide race. And the reason for that is the energized Democratic Party. We were in constant contact with the FDP. We were all doing telephone banking. We were all doing participatory organizing for that race. And as I say, we in Manatee County will be doing that here in the Sarasota race. I watched your discussion with Alex Miller and again found Alex very forthcoming in her comments. I can't get away from the fact, though, that I don't believe Alex resigned to clear the way for James Buchanan, but I think the Republican Party certainly pressured Alex to clear the way for James Buchanan, and I don't know how long they can do that.
Christine, I'll give you the last word here.
I don't know how energized, though, the Democrats were in the Tadeo election, because the turnout was only 15%. That's very, very low if we're going to have this energized Democratic Party to try to replace Republicans. Buchanan has obviously very strong name recognition. He's got a very high war chest, and I think he's got a good small business message that he's going around with. I think he's going to win in that election.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. FYI, you can watch past discussions. They're on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. We want to thank all our guests for being here today. Christine Hughes of the Sarasota County Republican Party, Cheryl Wilson, the chair of the Manatee County Democratic Party, and Wendy March, a political correspondent for the Tampa Bay Times.